How's it going, YouTube? Coming today with another video, and today, guys, what to bring you is Technical Play Part 2. I want to stop for a moment and say thank you all so very much for 7,000 subscribers. The fact that we're here right now is honestly just so unimaginable, and it's such a dream. It means the world to me, and you will never know how much it really does. It's something that I love teaching, and I love doing YouTube. Even when I'm not doing YouTube, I'm thinking about YouTube. This is something that I've just wanted to do for so long, and the ability to actually be able to do it is just so insane to me. So thank you all so very much for giving me this opportunity. I've spent the last week really upgrading my setup and really upgrading the quality of my content because I want to make sure that everyone is having a wonderful time and that my content matches that energy. So as we see, I have my floodlights, my boom arm, my pop filter, I have my green screen in the other room, my key lights. I really went all out and started upgrading my setup. I even have a new chair coming in soon, which is really nice too. So thank you all so very much for the opportunity. This is just honestly, again, just such a dream. Thank you. The next thing too is, since we did hit 7,000, Wednesday, December 1st at 7 p.m. EST. If you're not already in my Discord, go to the description below, join it, because we're going to be doing the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX watch through of the entire series. It's going to be one night a week. I will be picking Wednesday. It might switch up a little bit. I'll let everyone know a week prior though in Discord if it does. But for now, it's going to be Wednesdays at 7 p.m. EST. We're going to be streaming it in Discord, not on Twitch. So make sure that you hop over there. I really want to meet more of you, so I think that'll be a really fun way to do that as well, to just be able to watch the entire GX series and just have a really good time with my community. So thank you all so very much for 7,000 subscribers again. It means the world. Without further ado, today let's hop right into our video about technical play. So what I did today was I brought up another definition of what technical play really does mean, because it has so many different meanings out there that I think the last definition and this definition alone really put technical play in a solid category that I think is worth noting. So the other definition for technical play is navigating your opponent's deck and interactions while using minimal cards. What I mean by this is you want to be able to make sure that you have a way to follow up to your opponent. If you're going to be breaking their board and their board seems very daunting, you want to make sure that you have enough gas to be able to at least play back into them. It's different when you're playing Drytron and you have a grave, and even if you don't have a hand, your grave is your hand. It's like a second hand. If you don't have anything to follow back up on, which sometimes you don't, just to smash the board, you need to know that if your opponent top decks the nuts, like, you could lose that game right away. So you need to make sure that you at least have like 1 or 2 interactions that you can do on the follow-up turn so it can complement whatever you draw. This is very, very important, because if you don't have anything, then your top decking becomes a very simplified game state, and it's something that you don't really want to get into, but sometimes it's really just how Yu-Gi-Oh! Goes. So this is something to keep in the back of your mind. It's all about navigating your opponent's interactions in their deck with minimal cards. I think that's just the most important definition of technical play, alongside really going about the breaking boards part and really knowing a deck to its core. So without further ado, let's go into our first way to really enhance our technical play. That's going to be with Droll and Lockbird. So this is something that I feel like a lot of people discredit, especially this format with Bird Up running around. This is actually a really fun card that I've seen a lot of people start trying to main. And this is something that goes in and out of the mains based on the meta. And this is something that I feel like a lot of people I've seen lose because they never play around it. So we're going to be talking today about a couple of different ways that you really can play around the Droll and Lockbird and not get blindsided by this. Because the second you're blindsided by a Droll is usually the second that you're losing, because the decks that get Droll, they're usually the decks that can't stand a Droll. So this is the first one for me, at least, is I never use Emergence first. I always will use my Chizao effect first. If you use the Emergence, or if you're just playing like a general deck and use like Desires or Prosperity first, and then you get hit by the Droll, it hurts really bad. So you need to make sure that you're actually able to get to your cards that you need before you start activating your search cards. So what I mean by that is that if you have your Chizao, right, you're going to be adding your Long Young if you don't already have it. And then if you already have that, then you can go ahead and get your Sudden Shift, and then your Mo Yi is going to get you a draw. This overhaul just beats the Emergence because you're already getting an Emergence technically with the Cheese Out effect, and then you're also getting a draw. So you want to make sure that you always go into this effect first before you go ahead and rip your Emergence. This does change sometimes, especially if you're playing against a deck like Drytron, you need your Protoss, and you can make your Protoss live, then Emergence is fine. But other than that, I do feel like going with the Cheese Out play is just better, because then you at least have a monster negate, you potentially have a sudden shift, and then you have your Baron easy to flare from your Long Young as well. So this is always just a really solid way to play around Droll. Again, just don't rip your pot cards unless you really need to right away. Always try to get to your more important cards if need be. This does change if you are going second, I feel, with cards like Desires, because if you need it to like break a board, then you can rip it right away. But most of the time, you want to stray away from trying to rip it as early as possible, and just try to get your more meaningful cards first. The next thing is that if you were playing Striker, this is actually a really important thing with any deck, but Striker alone, because no Ray, no play. I've seen a lot of people lose because they'll add like unnecessary Widow Anchors when they already have one, or if they already have like a Widow Anchor, they'll add like the Shark Cannon. And this is fine, especially if you already have a Shizuku on board, but it's one of those situations where if you're playing against like Mech Knight, right, or if you're playing against like any kind of like go second board break deck, this is really important because like we're always going to add engage off for Shizuku the first time if we don't already draw it, right? So that's technically a way to play. It's a way to Ray. If you don't already have a Ray or an engage or what have you in hand, you need to add the Hornet Drone, because you need to make sure that you have some way to play the game. Because if you have on the follow-up the nice hand, but you have no way to like recur, and you have no way to really get into your engine, and you're only using their monsters solely, it can get really difficult. Because if you already have a Ray Engrave as well, the Hornet Drones are just fantastic. It does kind of suck if the token gets messed with, but at the same time, you want to keep a way to play in hand. Still a very technically sound thing to do here. The next thing I want to bring up is the technical play around an Imperial Order. A lot of people don't think about this, but this is something I've done several times on stream, and I've had a lot of people be like, wow, I didn't know you actually like thought about it like that. So I felt like it was really important to bring this into the video. One being the Imperial Order here will always cut your opponent down for 700. The way to counteract this, if you're playing Striker, is that you go Ray, and then you can blankly activate a spell. It doesn't matter which spell it is, but just activate a spell and put it in the graveyard. Even if it is negated by the IO, you can still activate it. So you put it in the graveyard, and so Ray will be 15, and the Kagari will be 16. So if you're swinging into an empty board with an IO, which is actually fairly common if they have IO, then you'll be able to hit for 15 and 16, do 31 damage, and put them down to 49. What's really important about this number is that they will actually burn themselves to death through an IO. So as long as you can last the next 7 standby phase skips, you should be fine. And that's really not a difficult task to do when you have things like Ray that can float. You have cards like Kinda that can prevent attacks. There's a lot of different ways that you can kind of stall your way through, especially if you have cards like There Can Be Only One, or what have you as well. So this is where I think it's really important that if you ever get stuck in an IO situation, don't freak out. Realize that if you get them to a multiple of 7, that they're going to burn themselves out with the IO, and it's not just going to fall off the board, which is honestly worse, because like when it falls off the board, then they have all their gas and all their spells that they've been saving, if they have any spells, to really try to kill you that turn. But if you can just get them down to that awkward stage where it's like, hey man, you're on a time count now, like a turn count, it really gets to a nice game where this is actually how I've been able to win multiple games when I'm under IO, is specifically going 15, 16, and putting them down to 49, which I think is really important to note. The next thing is think about holding the Imperm. I don't feel like I've seen many people do this very often lately, especially. This is where if you're playing against decks like Sword Soul, Virtual World, you want to hold the Imperm for your turn. I know it's very tempting, especially against Sword Soul, to hit things like the Mo Yi, so it can't really pop off. But like if they have anything else to go into the Cheese Out, especially in like the Tenyi build, or if they are playing the Instant Fusion, I feel like it's technically correct just to hold the Imperm, because the only Omni Negate that they end on is going to be that Baron. Very rarely anymore do you see them end on a Dragite. It can happen, but I don't really see it happen very often at all anymore. they usually would just end like sudden shift, Baron, cheese out. And so if you hold the Imperm for your turn, the only thing you have to worry about is like a monster negate and then like the pop 2. But if you can deal with like the monster negate card, especially if you're playing striker, you have like Afterburner, then you just play against a blank board for the most part that isn't really doing anything. Especially against Virtual World. It can get very tempting to Imperm things like the Zulkin, but it's still one of those things too where they can follow up very easily and make a Shen. And a lot of times the Shen just hurts way worse because everything that goes off the field, is banished. So that becomes a inherent problem. So definitely feel free to go ahead and save the Imperm for your turn. I know for a lot of people starting off that it does seem fairly tempting. You're like, all right, cool, I have the Imperm, but why not just drop it now? Especially when I play Go Second Striker like I am now. This is something where I'll hold the Imperm even against like the crazy bird up board. Because it's a free negation against the Utopic Future Dragon, and it just allows you to be able to play into a board a lot better than just kind of like throwing it out there and hoping that it stops something, if that makes sense. So for me, I always feel like it's a lot more proper just to hold the Imperm. The next thing here, holding resources versus Nibiru. So I know I talk about holding resources a lot, but it's really important, and I feel like this is one way that you can really get better at the game. I'm going to use Dragon as a really good example here, and so we're actually going to be talking about a couple different instances in different decks where this is also fairly relevant. So the first one here is going to be against Heretic Seal. If you're playing against a smart Dragon player and they're trying to pop off, and they know that you potentially have a Nibiru, it's game 2, it's game 3, they'll make the Heretic Seal first. So this is where you want to play as minimal as possible. You want to start off with like a Safer or a Chaos Space and go into your baby dragons. Hold the rest of your hand. Do not extend. Don't throw out the Noctovision. Don't throw out a Parallel Exceed if you're playing a Cyberus deck like Salad. Hold it in your hand. Even if you're playing Sun Avalon, you're still playing Exceed, like hold it. Just do as minimal combo as you can, because if you do get hit with a Nibiru on like your Heretic Seal and Dragon, you're going to summon out your red MD from the deck. So what's cool about that is if you held your Noctovision the whole time, you summon a Dark Dragon, you can then summon your Noctovision from your hand, then you can go ahead and use the red MD, and then you can go ahead and bring back your Tracer. And then what's even cooler about this is that you can either bring back the Tracer or the Synchron, and this is already being that 7 that it is, so you can go into your Chaotic Ruler if you haven't used that yet. You can get into a free Boral Savage, and then these two can go ahead and always make, or like these two can make like a Heretic Seal, and then you can use this effect to go ahead and pop like your field spell and then summon out the Recharger and then make a Savage. So even through a Nibiru, you can still make like the second Heretic Seal and a Savage. Or if you really need to get again to like your Chaotic Ruler, when you link these together, you can also get a draw. So when you are expecting things like Nibiru, you have to hold your extenders. Like you never want to just throw everything on the board, as even as tempting as it is. Sometimes just having a negation and an interruption is fine. And some people will try to overextend and compensate for that, and they will think like, okay, if I have like 3 or 4 negates, there's no way they're breaking this board. Well, I just saw someone throw their entire hand in the graveyard playing PK with Droplet and negate an entire board, so it can happen. It's very scary to think about with Droplet and Dark Ruler running around, but always just hold your extenders as much as possible, especially for cards like Nibiru, because that can be a really rough time. But doing this is just an inherent way just to play back into your opponent and just be like, that card didn't matter at all. Thanks for the extra token, to use as a, because you can even use the token to pop with Tracer, right? Which is really cool. So let's go on to the next one here. You have to know when to pass, and you have to know your matchups for this, because it's very important that you know what you're playing against, so they can't just like outright blow you out whenever you go to do this. So the first card here being Dimensional Barrier, the second one being Silent Graveyard. If you're not familiar with this card, discard 1 card, effects that activate in the graveyard this turn are negated. Very, very cool card. It works out very well, especially if you're playing against things like Prank Kids, or things like Phantom Knight. Very, very nice thing to have around, especially if you're playing Striker. Again, it's a free spell discard, and then it's also a free spell in the graveyard. So this is a nice little quick play for you as a chainable back row, which I feel like are the best back row in the game. Things that you can literally just chain to your opponent and just say, hey, your turn's over. And the last one here is Different Dimension Ground. There are a lot of matchups that these cards will just auto win against if you set them and then you just pass. And a lot of times, like, they won't have like reboot right from the hand. It's a one of, like, they could potentially have it, but it's so rare right now that you get to actually see those being cited. So this is when you have to know when to pass, right? If you're playing a deck and you feel very confident about your hand, but you know that it's game 2 and your opponent's sided pretty heavily for your deck probably, and you're like, man, I don't really want to put everything on the board right now just in case he cracks it and then I just lose. But if you have cards like your Dimensional Barrier, like your Silent Graveyard, and different Dimension Ground, if you just set these cards just by themselves and then pass to your opponent, this is literally a turn skip to your opponent, and then if you're playing a combo deck, you can just outright kill them the follow-up turn. If you're playing decks like Striker too, you can put in a lot of damage and you can start really getting another draw off the follow-up turn. You get a lot of free advantage just by passing with one card. And I feel like that's really underrated to do, but it's still very effective as well. So this is something that you should really be considering in your future games, is that if you have such a strong side card, maybe you don't do anything at all. You just set the one card and pass, because the odds that they actually have something like a reboot are so low that this will literally turn skip your opponent and you can try to O2K the follow-up turn. So the other thing I want to bring up here, it's in a simplified game state, take the hit. This is something where I've seen a lot of people just overextend like super hard. If you draw like an Imperm, right? And then they have like a normal summon Mo Yi, or like, let's say this was something that actually interacted with you and they're just like punching every turn for game. Don't like set the Imperm, or even if it was like a Chalice, right? Like, don't set the Chalice, just hold it in your hand, because if you're top decking and you're not going to die from the hits that you're taking, it's something where you really want to consider, like, okay, if he puts up a negate and I set this Chalice and then he blows it up and then I top deck a way to play the game and then I can't negate the Omni, then I'm going to lose. So I'd rather see you hold the Chalice and then lose because you just had the Omni anyway, than just setting it and watching it get popped and then watching you draw playable and then you couldn't play because they had the negate. So just take the hit over and over until it's going to get to a point where you just literally don't live. I'll do this a lot with Widow Anchors, where I'll hold it as long as possible, and then if I feel like I'm going to die the next turn, I'll set it, and then if they go to swing again, I'll take the biggest monster and then pass back. And then it really does suck when you top deck like Engage or something and then they have like the Omni because you had to burn the Widow, right? So definitely keep that in mind when you are looking at the simplified game states, is that sometimes it's proper just to take the hit. Sometimes you don't even need to interact with your opponent. Just hold as much card advantage in your hand as possible, because when you do draw playable, you're actually able to go back into their board a lot stronger than they're already still top decking with you, so it makes their top decks feel a lot less good, which again is just very important at the end of the day. Again, guys, if you're not already part of my community, go ahead in the description below. Join the Discord, join the fam. We will be watching on Wednesday, December 1st, the GX series. I'm very excited. 7 p.m. EST. Again, as well, I do teach on Metafy, so if you do need a coaching session, a one-on-one, feel free to go over there and check it out. If you have any questions or anything about this, definitely go ahead and feel free to PM me on Discord and ask any questions you have. I just want to say one more time, thank you all so very much for 7,000 subscribers. I really hope you all enjoy the new setup. I will be live tonight on Twitch at 7 p.m. EST. This is Monday, the 29th. Just in case you guys are watching this later. And I do stream every Monday and Tuesday. So I hope that everyone has a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.